aren't the droids we're looking for.
I got a bad feeling about this.
It's them! Blast them!
Hey guys, welcome back to another Tactics Talk channel episode. For your Patreon, we're just moving right along into part 2 where we're going to cover core units and special forces. If you are not, you had to wait a little bit, but that's okay. We're all here for a good time and to learn today. Today I'm going to be covering GAR units, our core options, and special forces. I will not be talking about mercenaries like pikes. I will put those in a Shadow Collective video. Yes, you're welcome for all 2 of you Shadow Collective players. So this is a pretty straightforward video. Clone Infantry is our only core unit for GAR. Go figure. It's got Reliable 1, throws a black dice in melee, and at range 1 to 3. It is a Courage 2 unit with 1 health apiece, and they come in a 4-pack of models. Honestly, the best thing about Clone Infantry is their weapon options. Both the personnel slot, the heavy weapon slot, and the first slot where you can throw in your commanders like Boyle, Ahsoka Tano, Clone Medics, Fives, Waxer, all kinds of crazy stuff. We could put the whole list of all of the upgrades on here, and I could sit here all day and ramble about how many different options you have with Clone Infantry. And honestly, these options make them fantastic. They're one of the few units in the game of Star Wars Legion that I truly feels like I could bring them back to the table again and again and try something different. But there is a downside to Clone Infantry. Really, there's a couple. The first is you don't have another choice right now. You're playing 3 Clone Infantry no matter what. And with that being said, I think they are probably the worst core unit in the game to just bring with no upgrades. I think that Clone Infantry really do want to spend some extra points to make it worth it. Especially since they're a Courage 2 unit, you can get so much value out of putting some heavy weapons behind them. But the other problem with that is they're not cheap. They start at 56 points, and mind you, they deserve it. But I think a big misconception with GAR is when people play against things like Clone Infantry, people are like, man, these guys are so good. GAR has it so good, and they do, but they're paying the premium for their infantry. And in this case, they don't have a choice. Now, mind you, I'm not giving them a bad grade, but I'm not going to give them this elite grade. I'm going to put them at a B+. I think simply because there are some fantastic options. We can talk about the price cost efficiency. They're pretty solid, but really their synergy is what brings them up in the grade department for me. And that's because we have things like Ahsoka Tano probably elevating these guys to a new level. We have things like Fives that just makes them a solid unit. We have cheap shotguns that makes them a great anti-melee, anti-aggro unit for 20 points. Z6s still throw 6 white dice. There's plenty of options for these guys. There's also a couple that don't really feel good anymore, like the Mortar and the RPS, mostly because they have cumbersome, but for the most part, these upgrades are solid through and through. You can also kit out this unit very versatilely with the 3 options in these slots. Having something like Boyle plus a shotgun plus a comms tech can be really cool, or better yet, something like Fives, a shotgun, and a comms tech makes for a devastating melee unit that can get an order and get a standby in melee. There's tons of cool tricks you could do with these guys, and I've seen so many GAR players have some really cool loadouts and setups for their Clone Infantry. So if you're someone that likes to deck out their classic infantry units and have a wide variety of options coming into the table, Clone Infantry are for you. However, I do think they necessarily need those upgrades to really perform at a higher level and make it worth that base cost. I think just bringing naked core units is something that I've seen some people pull off, but for the most part, when people bring Clone Infantry, they bring them to be useful and not just objective getters. They're not rebel troopers at 40 points that can run around and score points. They want to be elite, and in doing so, sometimes you have to pay an elite price. Thus why I'm giving them a B+. They're fantastic. They're the only core unit in the game, or not the only core unit in the game, but they're one of the only core units in the game with Courage 2, which is massive for getting the maximum activations out of these guys. So a fantastic unit to have in your core slot, but once again, limited options when it comes to picking a different core unit, but tons of options in how you're going to fixate your version of Clone Infantry. Moving on to Special Forces, we've got a couple. First up is the brand new ARF Troopers. Observe 2, Scout 1, low profile, unhindered, 1 black dice apiece in melee, and 1 black dice at range 1 to 4, coming in at 4 models with 1 health and 2 courage at speed 2. These guys have got some pretty unique upgrades as well. Once again, they can run all the personnel. They can run ARF Trooper Duo for that one slot, and they can do so as well for the heavy weapons upgrade. With this being said, Echo makes for an interesting unit. He adds a couple keywords that they don't necessarily have. I think ARF Troopers really like those surges, and so they're always looking to get tokens. Echo can really make use of your aim and make it like an old sniper unit, but way better. However, it's also really expensive. ARF Troopers are coming in at 66 points, and they are a old school Legion unit. They just want to sit back and shoot. They're not really aggressive objective getters. They're not going to be moving up the table too much. Even with the RPS, you have cumbersome, and that's just not a good upgrade for someone that's going to be moving around. So these are the type of units that you're going to scout, move, shoot, and probably just aim shoot the rest of the game for the most part. With this being said, I think this brings them down a little bit. You're not really going to be putting things like Jedi Guardian 5s, medics, maybe a couple clone commanders, but for the most part, none of this. I think the ARF Trooper Duo is the best upgrade for these guys to just for a cheap 26 points, add 2 extra black dice. But I've used this loadout before, and it's just not really that impressive. The game's very close up. It really wants people to force fighting on one another, but I do think ARF Troopers are one of the best sit back and shoot units in the game currently, especially now that ranged troopers have taken a pretty big hit. That low profile plus red dice is nothing to scoff at. If you truly sit these guys in the back and avoid aggressive enemies and play well, I think that you can keep these guys relatively healthy, and plinking wounds off of them does mean a lot for your opponents in terms of your dice pool, but it's not going to be an easy task. However, I just don't think ARF Troopers are quite worth their points, and unfortunately they're competing with ARC Troopers in the same slot, making it a much tougher decision to bring them. With that being said, I give ARF Troopers just a C+. I don't think they're bad, they're just definitely not competitive in the slot they currently occupy. Scout 1's nice, and having some turn 1 shooting in GAR is something that can feel lackluster depending on what list you're playing, but there's better things that can do the same thing. Next up, we have ARC Troopers, and these bad boys have been a menace to this version of the game for a while. In their personnel slot, they can essentially bring Ahsoka Tano, clone captains, clone medics, clone commanders, 5s, and Jedi Guardians, and then in their heavy weapons, DC-15s and Echo. These two different things are good options. The DC-15 was a little more notorious at the beginning of the game where you saw 8 people running snipers, and that was pretty cool, but also busted. ARC Troopers on their card have Charge, Impervious, Scale, Scout 2, Sharpshooter 1, Tactical 1, throwing 2 dice, 2 black dice at range 1 to 2, and in melee. They got 1 health apiece, 2 courage, and they move speed 2. With the Scout 2, these guys are notoriously fast and can move up the board turn 1 very quickly. The best thing about ARC Troopers is they're one of the most versatile units in the game. Range 2 seems to be a pretty big sweet spot for the game right now, just coming in and throwing buckets of dice at your opponent and trying to just one-shot things. But on top of that, ARC Troopers don't necessarily shy away from the melee aspect either. And since you have Tactical 1, you can double move into something with 2 aims and justify sometimes just not shooting things. In terms of upgrades, you've got a lot of options. Clone Commander is now 30 points, and these guys do want surges because they don't have any and they're fairly elite. Jedi Guardian seems like an obvious choice, but I think it takes down their versatility a little bit at that range 1 to 2 band, and instead turns them into a much more hardcore melee unit, which sometimes just doesn't work out when your opponent positions themselves correctly. The medic for 20 points now is pretty terrifying. I've played it a good chunk of times now, and I will say that just having a 20-point body that can bring someone back is extremely annoying in GAR, believe it or not. So these guys are a menace. They've been a menace for a while. I'm just gonna give them the A+. I don't want to, if I'm being honest with you. I don't think they are the A+, but I think they're probably the best thing in GAR, besides maybe Anakin, but I didn't give him an A+. I would give these guys an A, but with just the general community census, I'm gonna give them the A+, especially with this medic change. I do think that they are just the most versatile unit in the game, and honestly one of the best for the current state of the game. Whether we're talking objectives, fighting, melee, big dice pools, good value, cost efficiency, synergy, all of the things we've talked about, and just giving you a better chance of winning your games of Legion, this is one of those units you can put on the table. They're just so versatile. You can think of ARC Troopers like this, turn 1, they move 3 times. It's like, oh, cool. Most units, you didn't get anything out of it. You just move 3 times. The scout, move. Great. I'm in good board position. ARC Troopers just generated 3 aims. Great. Now I can put a clone commando down. I can share an aim. I can share an aim with Cody. I can share an aim with this guy. They just, no matter what action you take with an ARC Trooper, they do something. And that is the beauty of these guys, is even with one model, they can tie up something. They can just double move to generate 2 aims. They can move and take a dodge. They're just crazy good because they fit so well with the current meta. And on top of that, they just don't have any relative weaknesses. They don't have immune pierce, which I guess could maybe be a weakness, but impervious in GAR with surges and everything is going to feel extra bad sometimes when Darth Vader walks into a squad of these dudes and somehow your opponent rolls great and loses like 1 guy to Pierce 3. ARC Troopers are notoriously annoying. I think that the DC-15's a little much now, and I try to avoid it. Echo's kind of just way too expensive. I think that clone medics or clone captains are fine, and some people even find room for clone commanders. If you want to be really crazy, just go for Jedi Guardians, but I don't think that heavy weapons slot is necessarily as good as it used to be. And right next to these guys, I'll just go ahead and throw them in as well, is the Strike Team. The Strike Team was really good, but I think with that increase to the DC-15, or rather the base unit itself, it affected them where it's just not as solid to run extras of these. That Strike Team's really expensive for 2 models, and especially if you're going for the sniper plays, you're going to run out of time very quickly. So honestly, I'm just giving the Strike Team a straight up C. I don't think you should bring it, just bring the full unit, but I've been wrong before. But I think they nerfed arcs in a sense to stop you from just running 8 of them in 501st or 6 of them in other lists as well. With this being said, we have the 2 different versions of the Wookiees, and I'm going to talk about the Wookiee Warriors, the Noble Fighters first. This is the more melee version, coming in with Charge, Duelist, Indomitable, Scale, throwing 2 black dice in melee, and a black and white at range 1 to 2, 3 health apiece, 2 courage, white defense dice with no surging, and surge to hit on melee. They've got a couple of different upgrades, and that would be the Battle Shield Wookiee, Bowcaster, and Long Gun. For the most part, I don't see people using the Long Gun. Makes sense. It's a ranged weapon meant for more plinking and long-range suppression, and with a melee unit, meh. Bowcaster's perfectly fine on these guys because you can get into that range 2 shooting, just like we talked about being the mainstay of this current meta. It's not bad. Might as well just take ARC Troopers, but it's not bad. And then you have the Battle Shield Wookiee, which can give them Armor 1, Speed 1 with 2 black dice, or you can flip it over and just go full speed, 2 red dice. Can't use that at ranged, only in melee. With this being said, Wookiee Warriors, they're cool. But with the no surging and 3 health apiece, I'd say now more than ever in Legion, people have the dice pools available to them to just blast Wookiees off the table. In Kashyyyk Defenders, it's a little different because they're getting free moves when you wound them. They have more synergy. They can move up the table faster. But a big problem I have with Wookiees in general is they don't synergize in GAR very well at R. This is the main reason that ARC Troopers, in my opinion, are better, is obviously because they're cheaper somehow, but more importantly, they can share tokens with other clones. I can't use my clone infantry surges on Wookiees, so they just feel out of place in a lot of normal lists that are not Kashyyyk Defenders. In Kashyyyk Defenders, these guys are like a B+. There's enough Wookiees going around that it's an issue. In just straight up GAR, I think they're a D+. I don't think they're good. If you can get them in fully healthy, they're fantastic, but they take a massive hit for me right now because they have next to no synergy in a classic GAR list. And that's it. The unit itself is fine, but in the faction, it's not very good. It's expensive, it's trying to feel like an elite unit, and it's just kind of selfish. It doesn't generate anything for the rest of the GAR army, and that's not good for one of the most synergistic factions in the game. And so that kind of sucks. On the other side of that, don't get me wrong, Wookiee Warriors are in the same boat. Indomitable, Scale, Sharpshooter 1 with a black and white in melee, and then 2 white at range 1 to 3. Surge to hit, 3 health apiece, and 2 courage. They have Sharpshooter 1, which is nice, but I think these guys have all of those same problems I just talked about. The only really good thing between both of these is you used to be able to fire support into these shots, and so there was some play with these Wookiee warriors that were the Kashyyyk defenders this time. These guys, I'm giving a D. I'm not even going to give them a D+. I think they're a little worse just because there's better shooting in the game than these guys, and they are very aim hungry. I think you want to put the crossbow, maybe the long gun, and tack push on these dudes to make them worth it. But in reality, that's a lot of points going towards something that I could just be like, man, I'd rather have ARF troopers. Yeah, even ARF troopers before ARC troopers, I think, take these Kashyyyk defenders out of play. Now, 3 wounds apiece is nice, but like I said, I think we're in a point in Legion where dice pools have been increased because coverage are not a guaranteed, and we have more points to play with, and Wookiees, I feel like, are one of those units that suffer from that tremendously. Sometimes your cover saves will keep your Wookiees healthy, other times you're going to eat a full 10 dice to the face, and you know you're not saving any of them because you've got non-surging saves. Sure, it's still probably pretty hard to one-shot a Wookiee unit, but when you get them down to 1 to 2 models after just 1 shot, that's brutal. And now more than ever, we're seeing big dice pools enter the game that I think are just a disaster for most Wookiee players. Once again though, if you throw these guys in Kashyyyk defenders, I'd give them about a C. Nothing more, nothing less. It's a fantastic battle force, but I don't think it takes them to a good level per se. It's just you have so much of the same thing that it's unnatural to play against, and it kind of becomes a cliche thing. But that's the end of part 2 for our video. We've got our core and special forces covered, so make sure you guys check it out below. Put in the comments what you think. Like I said, I am not the end-all be-all of knowledge for Legion. I love when people tell me what they've been doing with these units, especially the ones that I'm like, not very good. And I love to hear how people have used them in ways that they can find success. So as always, good luck, have fun, and we'll see you for part 3 next time.
You got me, a little UNITY will get us by through the storm and the rain. I'll be by your side. Look alive, the best has yet to come. Just a word.